الذين فرقوا دينهم وكانوا شيعا كل حزب بما لديهم فرحون وإذا مس الناس ضر دعوا ربهم منيبين إليه ثم إذا أذاقهم منه رحمة إذا فريق منهم بربهم يشركون ليكفروا بما آتيناهم فتمتعوا فسوف تعلمون أم أنزلنا عليهم سلطانا فهو يتكلم بما كانوا به يشركون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Please recite Surah Al-Quran wa jami'a al-mu'minin.
بسم الله.
Ignore Salat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم والعن أعداءهم.
کربلا سے جو میری سمت ہوائیں آئیں، کربلا سے جو میری سمت ہوائیں آئیں، دیر تک گری ماتم کی صدائیں کربلا سے جو میری سمت ہوائیں آئیں، پھول مہکے جو بہاروں میں تو سوچا میں نے پھول مہکے جو بہاروں میں تو سوچا میں نے کن شہیدوں کے لیے سرخ قبائیں آئیں، کربلا سے جو میری سمت ہوائیں آئیں، آسمان اصغر پہ برسنے کو گھٹائے آئی، کربلا سے جو میری سمت ہوائیں آئیں، مسکراتے ہوئے تاروں نے جھکا لی آنکھیں، مسکراتے ہوئے تاروں نے جھکا لی آنکھیں، یاد جبھی علی اصغر کی ادائیں آئیں، کربلا سے جو میری سمت ہوائیں آئیں، خاک اڑتی رہی رستے میں بڑی دیر تلک، خاک اڑتی رہی رستے میں بڑی دیر تلک، بیویوں کو جو کبھی یاد ردائیں آئیں، کربلا سے جو میری سمت ہوائیں آئیں، نام عباس لیا بھی میرے دل نے محسن، نام عباس لیا بھی میرے دل نے محسن، پھر سلامی کو دو عالم کی وفائیں آئیں، کربلا سے جو میری سمت ہوائیں آئیں، دیر تک گری ماتم کی صدائیں آئیں، کربلا سے جو میری سمت ہوائیں آئیں،
اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد۔
الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله وأشهد أن عليا حجة الله صلوات وسلامه على
محمد وآل محمد.
حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله صمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجهم. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله كما هو أهله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرجع وأسجد. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. سمع له لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. سبوح قدوس رب الملائكة والروح. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبنا والحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله الله الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
قبل ما يتصدون ما في الأندام والجواشة. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن صل على محمد. اللهم صل على
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
أشهد أن علي ولي الله وأشهد أن علي حجة الله.
اللهم صل على
حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقرأ وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجهم. اللهم اجعل عواقب أمورنا خيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم واحشرنا معهم والعن أعداءهم. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. إلهي عظم الذنب من عبدك فليحسن العفو من عندك يا كريم. إلهي أنت كما نحب فاجعلنا كما تحب. الله أكبر. بسم الله وكفى والحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على
الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر
الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي، فأجول في طلب البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران، لا أدري في سهل وفي جبل، أم في أرض أم في سماء، أم في بر أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من، وقد علمت أنه علمك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسم بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله واجعل يا رب رزقك لي واسعا ومطلبه سهلا ومقريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي في رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
دعاء. بسم الله
الرحمن الرحيم. لا إله إلا الله إلها واحدا نحن له مسلمون. لا إله إلا الله ولا نعبد إلا إياه مخلصين له الدين ولو كره المشركون. لا إله إلا الله ربنا ورب آبائنا الأولين. لا إله إلا الله وحده وحده أنجز وعده ونصر عبده وعز جنده وهزم الأحزاب وحده. فله الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت ويميت ويحيي وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا سيد الشهداء بكربلاء يا أبا عبد الله. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وجميع الشهداء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أئمة المعصومين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا حجة القائم بن حسن المهدي مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان من شر الشيطان. يا شريك القرآن يا خليفة الرحمن يا مظهر الإيمان يا كعبد الإسلام إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك واجعلنا من خير أعوانه وأنصاره وشيعه والمستشهدين بين يديه. السلام عليكم جميعا معصومين والأنبياء والمرسلين ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. We're gonna recite a small English Marcia for baby Sakina. In the Arabic literature, she's called Ruqayya, the 4 years old daughter of Imam Hussain. Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat. This girl in Karbala, she looks like she is Sakina. Who is this girl in Karbala? She looks like she is Sakina. Who is this girl in Karbala? She looks like she is Sakina. She's coming towards the battlefield. She's coming towards the battlefield. Why is she turning towards Najaf? Why is she turning towards Najaf? Is her grandfather Ali? Is her grandfather Ali? Is her grandfather Ali? She looks like she is Sakina. Who is this girl in Karbala? She looks like she is Sakina. Crying, she come towards the field. Crying, she come towards the field with signs of sadness on her face. With signs of sadness on her face. For help, she calls Nade Ali. For help, she calls Nade Ali. For help, she calls Nade Ali. She looks like she is Sakina. Who is this girl in Karbala? She looks like she is Sakina. What is she crying so much for? What is she crying so much for? Why is this girl so terrified? Why is this girl so terrified? Did someone she knew pass away? Did someone she knew pass away? Did someone she knew pass away? She looks like she is Sakina. Who is this girl in like she is Sakina. Why are her ears bleeding so much? Why are her ears bleeding so much? Why is this young girl being slapped? Why is this young girl being slapped? This tender age and so much pain. This tender age and so much pain. This tender age and so much pain. She looks like she is Sakina. Who is this girl in Karbala? She looks like she is Sakina. Why is there no one helping her? Why is there no one helping her? No comfort and no sympathy. No comfort and no sympathy. Has she been orphaned at this age? Has she been orphaned at this age? Has she been orphaned at this age? She looks like she is Sakina. Who is this girl in Karbala? She looks like she is Sakina. Salawat.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. نعرہ تکبیر، نعرہ رسالت، نعرہ حیدری. برائے خوشنودی امام زمانہ بلند تر صلوات.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. غربت میں قتل ہو گیا مظلوم بے وطن. غربت میں قتل ہو گیا مظلوم بے وطن. میں بھائی بھائی کہتی تھی لاشا بہن بہن. تیروں پہ تھا رکھا ہوا لاشا حسین کا. ڈوبا ہوا لہو میں تھا کرتا حسین کا. آواز تھی حسین کی رہنا کفن کفن. میں بھائی بھائی کہتی تھی لاشا بہن بہن. آئی ناراض دو گھڑی پردیس کی فضا. کنبہ شہید ہو گیا میرا گھر اجڑ گیا. پردیس دیس غیر کا اپنا وطن وطن. میں بھائی بھائی کہتی تھی لاشا بہن بہن. ایک دن کے داغ میں نے 72 اٹھا لیے. کچھ داغ میں نے قلب کے اندر چھپا لیے. چھپتے نہیں چھپانے سے داغے رسن رسن. میں بھائی भाई कहती थी लाशा बहन बहन देखा है बाबा मैंने जो मंजर बताऊं क्या मेज़ों पे था रखा हुआ सर हर शहीद का घोड़ों के दौड़ने से था टुकड़े बदन बदन मैं भाई भाई कहती थी लाशा बहन बहन बरछी कलेजाए अली अकबर में जब लगी बाबा को दी सदा कभी आवाज मुझको दी कहता था सीना थाम के अम्मा चुभन चुभन मैं भाई भाई कहती थी लाशा बहन बहन गाजी के बाद और कयामत गुजर गई प्यासों की आस टूट के बन में बिखर गई एक शोर अल आतश का बपा था दहन दहन मैं भाई भाई कहती
برلان شود لال به هنگام ممات هر زبانی که فرستد به محمد صلوات این حسین کیست که عالم همه دیوانه اوست این چه شمعیست که جنها همه پروانه اوست کیست این کشته که دریا شده خونین جگرش سینه ای نیست که سوزی نبرد از شررش گر بپرسند که کی و لحظه میلادش بود گویم اون لحظه که لب تشنه جدا گشت سرش بهر یک سجده کامل ز خون کرد وضو خون پیشانی و خون دل و خون پسرش پیش پیکان بلا سینه سپر کرد ولی پنجر کودک 6 ماهه او شد سپرش با همه زخم بدن قاتل او گشت 2 زخم که یکی بر جگرش بود و یکی بر کمرش خون و زخم بدن و گرد و غبار صحرا 3 کفن بود در اون وادی سوزان ببرش پسرانم به فدای پسرانش تا هشت پدرانم همگی خاک قدوم پدرش این حسین کیست که عالم همه دیوانه اوست این چه شمعیست که جنها hame पैगाम ये उस सलावत
For Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
So I'm getting the slido.com, and you can send your questions there. I got 2-3 questions. I sent it to Maulana. So if you have any comments or questions, during the majlis or even after, you can send it to me anytime during the day, and I can deliver it to Maulana and give it. I request Maulana Hasan Rizvi to come to the member and give us the third majlis for Muharram. Salawat.
Three salawat, please. Three
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، شفيع المذنبين، رحمة للعالمين، سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين، روحي وأرواح العالمين للتراب مقدمه الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. صلوات على محمد وعلى One more salawat ala Muhammad wa My respected mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamu alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last night, we finished our discussion of the history of Azadari. The last point we had made was, how should we perform and engage and commemorate Azadari in today's times, right, contemporary era. So we said that there was different models for the majlis. How can people actually speak? What should we expect from the minbar? So one model we said was a very negative and hateful model. The second one was more positive and motivational, based in history. And the third we said was an educational model, whereas the speaker tries to make sure that contemporary issues are addressed and the people in the gathering learn something. They learn the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So we said that going by the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, we took the final two methods. We said that the Ahlul Bayt, at times, they gave their own fada'il and fadilat and their own virtues, and they shared that with the mu'mineen and mu'minat. And then they also made sure to teach individuals as well. If the mission of Islam, if the mission of all the anbiya and the mission of the imams was to perfect our character, to perfect our akhlaq, and make us change the way that we behave, then we have to make sure and find out exactly how do we do that. After we recognize who the Ahlul Bayt are, now we have to figure out, well, what are they teaching us? How can we become like them, like their companions, and follow in the seerah of our ulama? Then we recapped the different discussions we've had in our previous sessions in 2012 and 2016. We talked about identity and how we rationally proved all of the belief systems that we have, whether it's proving that God exists, whether it's proving that He's just. Then we talked about
the qualifications and characteristics of a successful mu'min. And we went through those different characteristics based on a tafsir of Surah Mu'minun, right, chapter 23. The last point we had mentioned is, now that we have a good idea of what it means to be Muslim versus mu'min, now that we know what it is to be a successful mu'min, what's the next step forward? What's something that we can practically start working on in this month of Muharram? So we said, out of all the ibadat, out of all the different a'mal and things that we could learn, we should try to give primary importance to the salah. And why? So we gave 3 points to prove that. We said the first was that according to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the alam of Islam, the flag of Islam, is salah. So if we're trying to carry that message along of Islam, we're trying to stand for the message and what Imam Hussein alayhi salam, his family and his companions, if we're trying to revive that and stand up for the same things they stood for, which was reviving true Islam, then we should carry the flag of Islam as well, which is salah. We should make sure that we pray our prayers properly. We also mentioned that the final last words of, according to some narrations, all of the prophets, but according to many narrations, especially the final prophet, was as-salah, as-salah, as-salah. 3 times the Prophet repeated it to Imam Ali alayhi salam. And we know that, again, given Imam Ali's character, given his actions and his a'mal, he didn't need any sort of reminder about salah. So this seems like it was a reminder for us, the followers of Ahlul Bayt. And the final point was that, according to the narrations from many of our imams, the prerequisite and criteria for having all of our other worship and actions being accepted is salah. So the hadith that we recited from the 8th imam was that if your salah is accepted, everything else is going to be accepted as well. But if your namaz is rejected, then everything else would be rejected as well. So logically, we should try to make sure our prayer is good, our prayer is fine. So what we said, what we'll try to do inshallah is examine what is the salat of a mu'min. What is salatul mu'min now? So what we're going to do inshallah over these next few nights is first make sure that we're following the proper wajibat, keeping away from the muharramat, the things which might break our prayer. Sometimes these common ahkam which are not normally discussed. Now, if people had spent the time and read the ahkam book, maybe you would know that. But we don't always get that time in the day, right? So the first reminder that I'd offer to myself and to everyone is there's only a few different rules that we're going to be able to go through, right? We have limited time here. And obviously, just me saying all these rules probably won't be enough. So it's good practice and a good habit for all of you, for every single person. Even if you think you know all of the rules, take the Tawdi al-Masail of your marja, whether it's Ayatul Sistani, Ayatul Khamenei, Ayatul Nasir bin Shirazi, whoever it happens to be, take their fatwa book and just keep it in your janamas. Keep it in your musalla. So that way, or keep it wherever you keep all of your prayer things, right? So that way, whenever you're done, after your tasbih, after your taqibat, whatever du'as you want to recite, just open it up and just start to do maybe one rule per namaz or something like that. If you do it little by little like that, that effort you'll see will change, right? The way that you connect now with the namaz is going to be different as well, because you'll be making sure that you're practicing at least the zahiri, the external aspect of the salah, which is very, very important. So now today, what are we going to do? There's a few questions we want to look at as we introduce this topic. So we want to look at the philosophy as well of salah, right? Okay, well, what are we doing in salah? What is salah? What is prayer? But we can ask another question at a higher level or a deeper level. Well, what is ibadat itself? What is worship? Why do we bother doing all these actions in the first place? Does God need us to do this? Does He need us to go and pray to Him every day? Is that what it is? Or we can ask even a deeper question. Well, why did God make us in the first place? Why were we put here? So what we'll try to do is take a look at the Quran, some of the ayat which address these issues. We'll take a look at some of the ahadith which the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ have addressed the purpose of creation and the purpose of ibadah. And then we'll try to give an answer to all these, inshaAllah, and give us a reason for how we can go forward and give importance to our salah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa So the first thing we want to ask, well, why did God even make us? right? Was he bored? Was he just sitting around in, not heaven, but wherever he was, and just like, oh, I want to make some human beings? Right? So what was the purpose? Why did God make us? You know, a lot of people, they have this common question and related questions. You know, why did God make us? Well, why did he give us free will? Why didn't he make us like angels? Why did he give us the ability to sin in the first place? Right? If he had made us angels, we all could have been living a happy life right now. But now we're living this kind of badbakht life in this dunya, right? In this world, where we have the ability to go against him, and we do sin, right? From time to time, unfortunately. And we sin, and hopefully we feel bad about it. But maybe that question and that thought crosses our mind. Well, Allah, if you didn't give me that ability to do ma'asiyah and sin against you in the first place, then I wouldn't do that. But, you know, you made me like this. You know, why'd you do that? So this question we did address in 2016. So I'm not going to mention it again because it does take a few lectures to go through. What we will try to just generally address, though, is why were we created in the first place? What's our purpose here? What are we doing here? So we can ask even a general question. Well, why is anything made? Why do you and I make anything? Right? What's the purpose for doing things in the first place? So we can analyze this question from two different perspectives. So let me give an example first. So I'm somewhat of an inventor, right? When I was a kid, I was a really good inventor, a really good chef. So I would try my best whenever I would go to like an ice cream store or whatever to get ice cream sodas, right? I love ice cream soda. But obviously I didn't always get the chance to go out, like my mom and dad wouldn't always take me to get ice cream. So, and we didn't always have all the ingredients at home, right? Because to make a proper ice cream soda, you need all these crazy ingredients, right? To make a really good one. So me being the creative, ingenious child that I was, I had to make up my own different version, right? A ghetto ice cream soda. So what I did is I took some milk, poured some soda inside, and voila, I had some ice cream soda. And that actually worked out. So now sometimes whenever I go somewhere, I mean, I don't really have sugar that much anymore, but when I do go places and there is soda, sometimes I might ask for a glass, like a half glass of milk. Like, what do you want milk for? So just give me a half a glass of milk, you'll see. I take some, whatever soda it is, Coke, Pepsi, whatever, and just fill it up halfway with Coke and Pepsi. So it's like half and half, right? Soda and milk. So obviously I get strange looks, but then I say, well, why don't you taste it first? They taste it and they say, okay, now it makes sense. Now, it was kind of a tangent, but the whole point is this. So you could ask me, all right, well, why did you make ice cream soda in the first place? Or this ghetto ice cream soda? So there's a reason that I made it. Well, it's because I couldn't get my hands on real ice cream soda, so I had to make a ghetto or a fake version, right? A cheap version. You can ask another question. What's the purpose of that fake ice cream soda itself? That's different than asking what I wanted to do. My purpose, my goal, my hadaf, my maqsad was just try to quench my thirst or to have my own desires fulfilled. I wanted an ice cream soda, I couldn't get it, so I had to invent my own. That's why I made it. But what's the purpose of ice cream soda itself, or this drink? Right? This drink is meant to quench thirst. Although ice cream soda itself might not do something like that, right? And you can ask this question for many different things. The actual item or the task or the action might have one purpose, but the person who's doing it might have a different purpose in mind as well. We can ask the same question for why we're created. What is our purpose? What are we doing here? Our purpose and reason for being here might be different than the intention that God had in his mind as well, right? So we have to understand that. Let me give one more example so it's clear. Why do parents send your kids to school? Why do you guys send your kids to school? So there's two ways of looking at it. One way is you can say, well, what's the purpose of school? The purpose of school is to get an education. And you might say, well, the education is so that you can get a good job. Well, why do you want a good job? So you can earn an income and take care of your family, right? That's the typical capitalist, consumerist kind of modern day outlook we have, right? Okay, that's the purpose of education. But is that, you parents who are here, was that your reason for sending your kids there? Maybe that was one of them, or maybe that's the reason you gave when other people asked you or your kids asked you. But maybe in the back of your mind, you were saying, I just want the kids out of the house. I want some peace and quiet. Well, everybody else is doing it, so I should do it too. And this question, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's important because a lot of people now are making this, asking this question. Should we be sending our kids to public school in this country, given the values that they're teaching there? Should we be keeping them at home, right? Try to homeschool? Should we be sending them to an Islamic school? So this idea of having a purpose in mind is very, very important. And anytime we want to go forward and make a decision, and go forward and decide to do something, we should ask ourselves, What am I doing this for? Is my goal and my reason, my purpose, my drive, is that in line with what Allah wants or not? And if it's not, then we better stop and reorient ourselves. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala alihi. So now let's see. Let's ask the question, okay, God, why are we here? What's our purpose? What are we doing here? Why did you make us? So Allah answers it many times in the Quran. We'll give two different verses as evidence. In chapter 51, right? Surah Al-Dhariyat, verse 56, the very famous verse, right? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. The only reason that I created jinn and human beings is for you to worship me. So God's pretty straightforward there. I made you to worship me, that's it. Okay. Now, another piece of evidence. This is in Surah Al-Nahl, chapter 16, verse 36. He says, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنْ يَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. So God's purpose in the previous verse, He said, I want you to worship me. Over here He's saying that we've sent prophets and messengers to every single nation, every single ummah. Why? So that they can tell people to do ibadat of Allah, to worship God, and to do ijtinab of taghut, to keep away from taghut. Now, taghut, sometimes the English translation they give is rebel, or a rebel, or something that's rebellious. What I want us to understand is this. Anything that takes you away from God is defined as a taghut. So sometimes a taghuti system could be there. It could be a whole system in play which tries to keep us away from God. It could be a taghuti environment. Maybe your workplace environment is taghuti, right? It's rebellious. Maybe your friends are tawaghit, right? The plural of taghut. Maybe they're very rebellious. They like to rebel against God, so they keep you away. Maybe some of your family members happen to be taghut as well, where they encourage you to sin, for example, right? So anything which takes you away from God is defined as a taghut. So over here, Allah is saying that the reason we sent prophets, their mission every time was to get people to worship God and to make them keep away from anything which would allow them to keep away from God, anything that would stop them from worshiping God. So now this is our kind of two purposes that we have over here: worshiping and keeping away from anything which is going to keep us away from God. Okay. So now the second question. I mean, that was easy enough, but if God is independent, He's al-Ghani, if He's all-powerful, if He doesn't need anything, well, why does He need us to worship Him then? What's the point? Why did you make us God? You're saying your purpose, our goal here is to worship You. You want us to worship You. Well, why? You don't need it, right? We know that it can't be for God. It's not any naqs, or there's no weakness, na'udhu billah, in God where He needs us to worship Him. He doesn't have some ego issue like we do on social media where we need people to, like whatever we're doing. That's not what God needs. So it must be for us. How could it be for us? If no one were to obey God, or even if nobody believed in God, He would still remain perfect, right? But if now we don't believe in God, or we don't obey God, then we would still remain imperfect. The system of ibadah is set up so that we can change the way that we're living our lives. It's a specific program that God has given us for us to live our lives. Well, how is that possible? First, we need to understand this concept of ibadah, of worship itself. Like, what is worship? Now, normally, when I think most of us, when we hear the word worship, right, ibadat, we think about religious people, right? Christians worship, Jews worship, Buddhists have some sort of worship. Obviously, we worship. Everybody has their sort of different actions. Do you think that atheists worship? Or materialists? Or agnostics, do they worship? Well, that's going to depend on what we mean by ibadat, right? If you look at the actual definition that's given and the hidden meaning of ibadat and worship, every single individual on this earth does some sort of worship. Let me explain why. If you can send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. If we say that worship means a person giving up their own desires, their own life, their own will, their own wants, completely submitting to somebody else or something else, and doing whatever they ask for, even without hesitation, right? Just going ahead and somebody says something and you just do it, right? That's a sense of worship. You praise them constantly. If they tell you to do something or they give you information, you usually don't question it, right? You just go ahead and listen, and you go ahead and share that information with other people as well, right? You worship this sort of individual. With that kind of definition, we can explain a few different reasons how every single person, even an atheist, has an object of worship. So the first reason that, or first cause that causes people to worship something is when something or someone has this grandness, majesty, right? They're this big kind of awesome personality. So let's give an example of celebrities. I'm sure many of you have seen on, let's say, videos, or have seen the way that, especially, let's say, preteens or teens, they act when it comes to certain, like, entertainers or singers, things like that, right? The things that they do at a concert. Sometimes I've seen even these Muslim singers, women throw their hijabs at the Muslim singers, right? So people do some crazy stuff when they're in that kind of intoxicated mode. So they basically worship these celebrities, right? If that celebrity were to tell them, listen, I want all of you to put your hands in the air. That's exactly, they're going to do it without question, right? Nobody in the audience is like, well, excuse me, why do you want me to put my hands in the air? It's not just celebrities, right? You have these scholars as well. And scholars are two different types, right? There's atheistic scholars, or secularist scholars, or materialistic scholars, and then there's religious ones. And it applies to both. So for many of us and non-religious people, they have this idea of worshiping celebrity or just general scientists. So for example, if I were to say, you know, Stephen Hawking has this idea about black holes or about quantum mechanics and this and that, and I start explaining everything, I was like, oh, Stephen Hawking said that? Okay. And you'll just accept it right away, right? Because you hear his name, right? And many atheists today, that's the same thing they're doing. When they hear their famous celebrity atheists like Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins or the late Christopher Hitchens, Christopher Lawrence, all these individuals, they say one thing and they grab it right away. They don't think twice, they don't do any research. They say, oh, they said this, and they go ahead and just kind of regurgitate it over and over again, right? Without any research, without any thinking. We are subject to this as well, not just with scientists, right? Because if one scientist comes and says, hey, you know, there's a benefit in alcohol, right? They read one study out of context. Then they'll come like, Molana, I read that there's a benefit to wine, so why did God make it haram? Because science says I should have a glass of wine a day, so, and, you know, religion can't be illogical, so I'm going to go ahead and drink a glass of wine a day, right? So they put science at a higher pedestal, on a higher pedestal than religion. Obviously there's an answer to that, but, you know, I don't want to go through that right now. But it's not just scientists, it's religious scholars too. Right now, especially in this country, we're stuck in this epidemic and this disease and problem of scholar worship. Whether it's regular people who are coming to our centers and speaking on the minbar, whether it's scholars in places like the Hawza, like Najaf or Qom, right? People are worshiping these individuals when they never asked to be worshipped. They're trying to point back to the Ahlul Bayt and Allah, and we end up getting focused on them. So one individual comes and says, you know, in this community, you guys should do X, Y, Z. Or my opinion about this issue is whatever, ABC. And because the person happens to be a great speaker, right, they're charming, or whatever it is, you take whatever you like from that individual, and then you just start following it without even researching or questioning. Then what happens now? If somebody else comes, let's say, next week, or the next Muharram, or next Ramadan, and they say the opposite, right? Let's say one person comes to the minbar and says that, you know, we shouldn't be uniting with other schools in Islam. Right? We should be cursing them, their personalities. We should be disuniting from them. We shouldn't be praying with them. We shouldn't be talking to them. Whatever. We should be harsh with them. And somebody else might say, well, yeah, I like the scholar. He made good points. Like, he speaks really well. So it sounds good. Now, if somebody else comes next Muharram and says the exact opposite, we need to unify and have unity with our brothers in Islam and brothers and sisters in Islam. Then what are you going to do? How are you going to be able to judge between them? What ends up happening in our communities is that you get these scholar fights, right? It's not the scholars that are fighting, it's us who try to take the opinions of different scholars and make them fight on our behalf, right? Well, my scholar or my marja said X, Y, Z. Well, my marja said this, or my scholar said that. And especially now that, Many of these personalities are active on social media. It makes it worse and worse. And unless individuals have the criteria to judge between different scholars, why are we even making opinions in the first place? Who are we to say which of these opinions are correct or not? We haven't studied that much. We haven't gone to the Hausa. We don't know if this person's proof is better than this person's proof. In the same way that if I were to come on here and start talking about, let's say, how vaccinations are dangerous, every doctor here would probably slap me after the majlis, right? They'd say, what are you doing? You have no right to judge. You can't tell people to not get vaccinated. But you have no medical background. I'd say, well, you know what? I saw some YouTube videos and I read some articles online, so I think I'm qualified. If I have no medical training or background, how can I start judging between two different pieces of medical literature? I don't have the training for that. And even if I watch some YouTube video and you have some pseudo medical scholar or some whatever, it's naturalist or naturopath, whatever, and they give their arguments, I have no idea what the weaknesses of those arguments are. In the same way for us, we might not be able to pick up the weaknesses and arguments of different scholars that comes. So the advice here for us would be, take everything you hear with a grain of salt. There's nothing wrong. We should be respecting everybody that comes. But it's a good idea for us to get in the habit of asking for proofs. And if this scholar is a true scholar, they should be able to offer their proofs. And even more than that, if they let's say they're anti-unity, as an example, they should be able to give you the proofs for the other side of the argument as well. Right? They should be able to tell you, well, these are the other scholars who believe in pro-unity, and these are their arguments. They should be able to explain to you all the different positions and opinions that exist among our ulama and scholars, and explain all of them to you such that they're strong arguments, not create a straw man, right? What they call creating a steel man or an iron man. Creating strong arguments and sharing it with you, and saying, okay, here are the different arguments, now you should be able to figure out which one you want to pick, but don't fight over these things. They're not your job, it's not your job to fight. Where they want to discuss and debate, that happens in the Hausa. Don't bring those Hausa arguments over here. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. One more salawat ala Muhammad.
Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
So, the first reason people will worship, or what will cause them to worship somebody or something, is if they see some sort of greatness or information or knowledge, or they're awe-inspired by this person, this individual. The second thing is when it comes from a dependency or gratitude. When you're grateful to someone or something, or you're dependent on them, and maybe you don't have a choice, then you're going to worship them in some way. Let's give some examples. One example specifically because we're running out of time. One clear example is sometimes the way that we worship our parents or people in our family, right? Elders. Now this is different than respecting, right? I'm not talking about respect, I'm talking about clear worship. The same problem that what the Arabs had when Islam was being given to them. When all the prophets came and tried to explain the path and the true path of Allah, they said, well, but our forefathers were doing something else. We have to follow what they followed. In the Quran, and the Imams would argue that if you know what your parents and your forefathers did was stupid and irrational, are you still going to do it? They said, yeah, because that's what they do. We have to keep that practice up. So sometimes, you have to understand where they're coming from. Our parents have raised us. They've given us a home. They've given us food. They've given us clothing. They've given us education. They've given us security and peace, right? They've given us life. So of course there's a natural need to want to do everything that they want. You want to make them happy, right? That makes sense, it's rational. But it doesn't mean that we can't question some of the things that they say. There's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes, unfortunately, in many households, in households of people who claim to be followers of the Ahlul Bayt, many parents try to create an environment where their kids do pure ibadat and ita'at of them. And this is not the way the Ahlul Bayt alayhi have encouraged us. Islamic parenting is a very, very important discussion. And inshallah, if we have time, maybe we can give some points regarding that. But one of the main things they say from the Ahlul Bayt is that crucial phase when a child is 0 to 7, that first initial phase, is that they're your Sayyid, they're your master, not the other way around. You should be listening to everything that your child says when you're that young, not that they should be obeying you. And that's very, very tough for many of us to understand. I say, well, these kids don't know any better. That's the way that Islam, the Ahlul Bayt, and now even Western psychology has picked up on this after many years. That this learning through play, learning through freedom is the best way for children in that early phase to interact with the world. And you see the result. Those individuals become much happier later on. They become much more creative and intelligent, much more inquisitive, critical thinkers. They become much more social. When children are forced to do things, I guarantee you, because I've been to many communities, and this is what the psychology says as well, the psychological literature, those children will be one of two types if they're forced to do things, if everything is given to them in a harsh manner, without love. Either they're just going to obey anybody or anything that comes their way, like Imam Ali says in Nahju Balagha, whatever way the wind blows, they're going to follow it. So if a fasiq comes and tells them to do something, they're going to obey. If Yazid comes and says to do something, they're going to listen. That's one type. The other type is that they're just going to move away from anybody and they're only going to follow their own ego and their own nafs. Right? Because they say, I can't trust anybody else because nobody let me ever express myself when I was younger. Look at how child celebrities grow up. When they're younger, they're forced to live this celebrity lifestyle, right? They're forced to go and take these classes, singing lessons, dancing lessons, all of this. What happens when they get older, when they have a little bit of independence? Drugs, alcohol, abuse, suicide. Because they didn't get a chance to act like children when they were younger, so they start acting like immature children when they're older. And we see this in our communities as well. Many individuals, sorry for saying it like this, who might be elder, sometimes act like children. Well, I didn't get any chai today. Well, I don't like this food. What do you mean you don't like the food? You don't like the chai? Is this the tabarruk from Imam Hussein? And you're complaining about the food and the tabarruk? It's immaturity that comes because when they were younger, they didn't get to express themselves as a child. So what we have to do, inshallah, as parents here, is make sure in that 0 to 7 phase, we allow them that freedom. We don't force things on them. We teach them by our example. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Which leads us to our next point, which is habit and upbringing. Sometimes people worship just out of habit and upbringing, right? So we mentioned culture. Culture is one thing. So sometimes youth will think, yeah, this kind of worship idea, this happens to the elder generation or my parents or immigrants who come. They're the ones who do all this stuff. Well, not so fast. Many, many youth are stuck under that same sort of worship culture over here. If you ask them about a lot of concepts that they've learned in school, concepts like, let's say, evolution, or the Big Bang Theory, democracy, capitalism, or these progressive liberal Western values, they would worship these values over the values of the Ahlul Bayt. And what they end up doing is these new kind of progressive liberal Muslims, is they take values that they believe are true and right and moral or whatever, and they start putting that on top of Islam. They say, you know what, I'll tell the Quran what it should say. I'll tell Allah, na'udhu billah, what Islam should be like. Islam should have these kind of values of tolerance. Islam should say this about freedom of speech. Islam should say this about interacting with other individuals. Islam should say this about equality of marriage. We start dictating to Allah, na'udhu billah, what Islam should be, rather than us coming to the Quran and Ahlul Bayt and saying, we're empty, you tell us how we should believe in Allah. So we have to be careful of that as well, especially those who are born and raised in this country. So now you can see, based on this idea of worship, anybody is subject to worshiping things. You can worship ideas, you can worship people, but the biggest idol of all, the biggest thing that can be worshipped, and the worst, the baddest, the biggest thing that's worshipped, is the ego, is the nafs. That worship of the self, that Fir'auni idea of Ana Rabbukum al-A'la, that is the biggest idol that we have to learn how to destroy. I'll end today with a quote from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. He says regarding this point, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ مُحَمَّدًا بِالْحَقِّ. He sent the Prophet Muhammad with haqq, with truth, so that he could redirect people from the ibadat and the worship of idols towards the ibadat of Allah. So the mission of Islam was not to teach people how to do ibadat. Islam didn't come and tell people worship. People already worship something. We have some sort of religion built into us. Sometimes that object of worship is a physical idol, like it was back in the day, and it is for a few individuals and few religions now. Sometimes it's personalities, sometimes it's ideologies, and sometimes it's certain values. But the biggest idol of all that exists today is our own nafs, our own ego. This idol is what keeps us away from everything else. And this then leads us to the point, well, what's the point of worship then? Why are we here? The purpose of worship, when Allah is saying, I only created you, the whole reason is so that you can worship me. Well, okay, well, Allah, what are you? You're pure perfection. So if I'm worshiping you, I'm trying to get towards that perfection. I'm trying to understand what that perfection is. So a Muslim, even a person who believes in these ideas about Islam, sometimes, even though they say that they believe in God, sometimes they secretly also worship their ego as well. And then they end up doing what they call shirk khafi or makhfi, hidden shirk. They're putting a partner next to God. So now, what we see is a formula here. The stronger your ego gets, the farther away that we get from Allah. The more and more we start feeding and encouraging our own desires, our own wants, the more and more we start moving away from exactly what Allah wants. You can't fit two of them in the same place. Your heart can only handle one. Either it's what God wants or what you want. If you think that you know better than God, na'udhu billah, then you become worse than Fir'aun. Now, inshallah, none of us are like that. But sometimes in the way that we go forward in our actions, the decisions that we make, the example I gave before was parenting. Sometimes we hear this idea of the children being the masters from that early phase, right? And I mentioned this I mentioned this online. I shared an article about forcing, right? And about shyness in kids, how shyness is actually a good trait. And I mentioned it in regards to, many parents, whenever they see somebody comes to their house or they go somewhere else or in the community, they try to force their kids, say salam to them, right? And it's good, we want to encourage our kids to say salam. But if we're forcing them to do that, if we're not setting that example in the first place, I guarantee that child will never say salam to anybody in their lives. If you and us, all of us, between spouses, if our kids don't see us when we wake up saying salam to each other, and I've been in many households, I don't see husband and wives saying salam to each other in the morning. Right? They just kind of wake up and say, khana khan. What's for nashta? What's for breakfast? Where's chai? Right? Sometimes, and people, that's actually more talkative than many couples. Some will just wake up and say, all right, so what are we doing today? That's it. There's no kind of conversation between the couple. But now imagine you wake up, you say salam to each other, you go and initiate salam to your children. When you go to dinner parties or you come to the community and your child sees you go up and say salam to everybody, they'll start learning. Yeah, it might not happen right away, that's okay, but they'll learn through your example. And then afterwards you can give them reminders. Reminders are fine, but to sit there and force them to do that, especially if it's in front of other individuals, I guarantee you, both in the Western literature and the Islamic literature, you are setting up this child for failure. And there's going to come a point there, not only will they not say salam to anybody, but they'll probably leave Islam altogether. It sounds extreme, but trust me, I've been involved in these cases for many, many years, and I've seen this happen in many communities, where children now are just leaving Islam altogether. So, the minute our desires come in the picture, Allah's desires come out. The minute we say, I want to do this, I want that, me, my, ana, then God is out of the picture. The purpose of worship, the purpose we've been created for, is to destroy that ego. That's why we're here. We were given this body, this free will to say, for us to be tested. God's saying, I'm giving you this free will, but I'm also giving you the potential for perfection as well. You can become an insan kamil. You can become a perfect human being. These examples I'm sending down with the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salam. I'm sending them down to show you what a perfect human being looks like. When you see the Prophet, when you see the Imams doing what they do, it's not because Allah is saying, I didn't force them to do that. They have free will as well. They're not robots. Angels are robots. That's why I didn't make you like an angel. Because an angel could never understand what perfection is. That's why angels will never end up going to heaven. Because if they got there, they wouldn't know what to do with it. We, as human beings, in this dunya, we have a taste of what's bad, and we have a taste of what's good. Only when you taste that difference, you understand what is better and what is worse, right? So now, when you get a taste of good and bad things here, then you can actually benefit from and understand the ni'mat and barakat in Jannah. If we were forced to do everything, then heaven wouldn't have any meaning for us, right? Neither would hell. We are here. Our purpose was to follow this system that God has laid down to become perfect individuals. That's what we're made for. God made us for Jannah. It's up to us whether we want to get there or not. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. And this is why, according to many of the riwayat, the companions asked the Imams, what is Allah saying here? That I only created you just so that you can worship me. They're saying that وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونِ, meaning this إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونِ, so that you can worship me, is actually إِلَّا لِيَعْرِفُونِ. It's so that you can get ma'rifat of me. So that you can have ma'rifatullah. You can have this deep recognition. Not some superficial idea of Allah ek panjat and panch. Nothing like that. God is one and this and that. We're talking about a truly deep understanding of God so that it affects every single dimension and sphere of our life. A good way to tell whether this is happening is all of us who are trying to engage in some sort of ibadah, if you're doing your wajibat and trying to stay away from muharramat, has your worldview, has your ideology changed at all? One of my favorite analogies is The Matrix. I don't know how many of you have seen it, right? Because you have kind of a difference in the age gap. But The Matrix is a perfect analogy. After you've actually woken up and realized that this world is an illusion, you should be looking at this place differently. Once you recognize and understand who Allah is, who the Ahlul Bayt are, and the Sharia, the system that they've given us, and you start acting upon it, you should see a difference everywhere that you go. You know, one of the questions that was posed last night, and I'm not going to get a chance to answer it today, maybe we'll save it for another night, is, you know, when, let's say, a person stubs their toe or something bad happens to them, is that punishment from God? Is God testing me? How do I see that? When a person purifies themselves, when they destroy their ego, when they start following this path of Sharia, Allah makes it clear for them what was the purpose of that action. And they'll start to see what was the true reason for that. Right? Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala. So, to summarize today, we were created just for the sake of worship, just to worship God. What is worshiping God? What is God? God is pure, absolute perfection, infinite perfection. So, in order for us to get and understand that perfection, to get His ma'rifah, for us to become perfect, God has given us a system as well. If you want to become a perfect individual, if you want to change your life and become the best version of you possible, insani kamil, then here's the system you have to follow. In the same way, if you were trying to become a healthy individual, you would follow a diet or a regimen from a nutritionist, from your doctors, from your physical therapist, from a physical trainer, right? If you want the perfect body, you're going to follow their advice. They're going to give you a system. In the same way, if you want to live a perfect life, if you want to have a perfect existence, you want perfect thinking, perfect behavior, perfect thoughts, all of this, Allah's given you a way to do that. You follow the Sharia, you do your wajibat, you keep away from what's haram, you try your best to follow what's mustahab and recommended, you try your best to keep away from what's not recommended. This will change your mode of wujud. This will change your whole life. You'll start to see things in the same way Nur did, as ones and zeros, right? The way that you look at life will be different. The way that you interact with people will be different. You know those true religious people in the community, the ones who are living their lives a proper muttaqi religious life, we all know who they are. We see that the way that they interact with people is amazing, right? They're always happy, right? They're always giving people the benefit of the doubt. So our ibadah, the system of worship, should have an effect on our daily life. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. So from tomorrow, inshallah, we'll start a discussion on some more rulings and some more philosophy of this salat of a mu'min, and see if we can start implementing it in our daily life. Salawat ala Muhammad wa
ala. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
We started by talking about Imam and his family and companions leaving from Medina, making his way to Mecca, then leaving Mecca and making his way towards Kufa, and then being directed towards Karbala. Tonight we'll finally recite the musibah, the gham, and the tragedy of the first shaheed of this whole episode and tragedy of Karbala. Now many of us think that Karbala starts in Karbala itself. The whole episode and tragedy, the gham, the pain, the bala, begins in Karbala. But actually, before Muharram, we see that the first shaheed, first shahada takes place in Kufa. I want you to picture something and think about something truly and deeply. Let's say someone invited you to their house, right? They invite you far away. They want you to come over. They want you to be their guest. So you come, and they tell you that, come in, we'll take care of you, we'll give you food, you can stay with us for a few nights. Anything you need, we'll take care of. So imagine you plan for this trip, you're excited, you pack your things up, you make your way there, you get to the person's house, you ring the bell, they open the door, and they shove you away. They tell you to get lost. We don't want you here anymore. How much heartbreak would you feel there if this was a close friend of yours, a close family member of yours? With all of your heart and soul, you left everything to go and be with them and be taken care of by them, and then you get to their door and they get rid of you. This is the true ghurba and tragedy of Muslim ibn Aqil. Imam Hussein knows that Muslims, even though they're sending letters and asking the Imam to come, he knows that he has to follow the seerah of his father and the seerah of his grandfather. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salam, they never do anything without making a plan ahead of time. The Imam knows he should send a representative first. In the same way that the Prophet had sent Mus'ab ibn Umair to Medina before the Prophet made his hijrah, Imam Hussein also sends Muslim ibn Aqil to Kufa to check out the situation. See if they're actually going to support us. See if they're actually going to stand up for our rights. Imagine, when Muslim is leaving, did he think in his mind that this would be the last time that he would see his children? His beautiful daughter Hamida? You think that would be the thing that was crossing his mind? They've got 16, 20,000 letters. Which person would ever think that, no, when I get there, they're going to betray me? It probably never even crossed his mind. I'm sure when he said goodbye to his children, he said a simple goodbye. If only Muslim knew that this would be the last time that he'd be able to say goodbye, I'm sure he would have given his daughter one last hug. The people of Kufa initially try to support Muslim, but when Ibn Ziyad comes and he threatens the people of Kufa, one by one they start leaving and stop supporting him. Muslim now, we see, is in the masjid. He has some supporters left. They're reading Maghrib and Isha behind him. But little by little, those doubts, those whispers come into the minds of these supporters of Muslim. And in the middle of Salah, they start leaving. In between the Salah, they start leaving. So much so that they say, when Muslim turned around after the Isha prayer was done, he saw that now only a handful of people are with him now. Imagine you start with hundreds, if not thousands of people supporting you. And then you turn around in your moment where you're going to stand up against Ibn Ziyad, and now you have 5, 10 people with you. Muslim makes his way towards the palace of Ibn Ziyad because he says, I still have a mission to do. As he goes forward, he's going through the streets that he's not familiar with. The people, they start trailing behind Muslim because they don't want him to see what they're about to do. As they start passing different alleyways, they secretly start walking away from him and start sneaking away from the company of Muslim. Muslim finally ends up at the palace of Ibn Ziyad, at the doors, at the gates. When he turns around, he sees that he's all alone now and there's nobody else left with him. A person who left everything behind, he left his family behind, in a place that he's not familiar with, is now stuck in Kufa with no one to help. He has no money left. He has no supporters. There's no one there for him. There's no way for him to even reach out and contact anybody. Now Muslim is gharib. He starts walking around, wandering from street to street. He sits down on the steps of one house and begins crying, Wa ghariba, wa ghurba. a woman inside this house comes out and she's kind to her. She's kind to Muslim. She offers him some water. When she finds out that this is representative in the wakil of the imam, she allows him to stay inside. But she warns him that my son won't be so kind to you, so you have to make sure to stay quiet. The son returns in the middle of the night and realizes that somebody's staying there. The narration say that this individual, this son, this mal'oon, heard the dhikr and adhkar of Muslim ibn Aqil. That's what made him go. He tells Ibn Ziyad comes and sends warriors and soldiers. The soldiers surround Muslim ibn Aqil. He tries his best to fight them off, but they become too much for him. They take him prisoner and now put him in front of Ibn Ziyad in the palace. When he's there, Ibn Ziyad says, you're trying to cause a fitna in Kufa. Your sentence is death. Do you have any last wishes? Do you have any wasiyah that you want to give? And Muslim ibn Aqil now gives his final wasiyah. He says, I have 3 wishes. The first is that I've collected many debts while I've been in Kufa. Sell my weapon, sell my armor, and pay off my debts. The second is, give me a proper Muslim and Islamic death. When I die, wash my body, perform the ghusl, put the kafan around my body, and bury it the way that it should be buried according to Islamic law. And the final thing, and this is the most important one, is please let me write a letter to my Mawla Hussein. Let me send it and tell him not to come to Kufa. Let me tell Hussein not to come here, because if he comes here, the people of Kufa will disobey him. The people of Kufa will go back on their word. The people of Kufa are not people who are following Allah, they're following their own egos and desires. Let me send a letter to my Mawla Hussein. Ibn Ziyad says, for your first request, fine, we'll grant that. As for your second request, I'll never grant that. We'll make sure to drag your body throughout the streets of Kufa so everybody knows what happens when they go against this governor. And as for your final request, we will never ever let you contact Hussein. And we'll make sure Hussein comes here and suffers the same fate as you will face. The executor comes and takes Muslim to the top of the palace. Now normally, any of us who are in the same situation would be crying, we'd be screaming, we'd be in fear for our life, we'd be begging for our life in that instance. But Muslim ibn Aqil is from Bani Hashim. He's been trained by Imam Hussein. He doesn't have this in his heart. He is connected to Allah. In his last moments, he's doing adhkar. He's saying, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. He's saying, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah. He's reciting his shahada. He's doing istighfar, saying, Astaghfirullah, Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. Ya Allah, forgive me for what I've done in this world. And then finally, as the sword is about to come down and strike him, they say that he turns towards where he imagined the Imam would be, and says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, alayka minni salam. A person from within Kufa is able to send word to the caravan that's coming, the caravan of Imam, and let him know that Muslim ibn Aqil was martyred, and he was killed by the people of Ibn Ziyad. When the word comes to Imam, the first thing Imam does, besides weeping and shedding his tears, is he calls the young daughter of Muslim ibn Aqil, whose name was Hamida. He comes and takes Hamida and begins stroking her head, kissing her head. He took some earrings and put it on her ears, and began showing her all this affection and love, and says, Ya Ammu, Chacha Jan, why are you treating me like this? I know very well that this is how you treat somebody who's yatim. I know that this is how you treat an orphan. What happened to my father? Do I have somebody that's going to come back to me now? Hussein says, don't worry. I'll be your father now. Qasim and Ali al-Akbar and Imam Sajjad, they're going to be your brothers. And Sakina now will be your sister. Don't worry, we're still your family. We're still here. But when Sakina ends up in Sham, who will be there to console her? Who will be there to take care of Sakina and say, we have a way to support you, Sakina. We have somebody to console you. Who will be there to stroke the head of Sakina after she's being stopped by Shimmer over and over again? ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون بغير قضائه وتسليما لأمره. Ya Allah, we ask you by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad to forgive all mu'mineen, mu'minat, Muslimin, Muslimat, forgive us for our sins and our shortcomings in our lives. Give us the tawfiq by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad to live a less egotistical life and to be more connected to you. Help us develop our taqwa. Allah, we ask you by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad to make us the supporters and helpers of the Imam and to hasten his return. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ya Hasan.
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein.